Hey everyone, this is Chris back with the Beamer Barn, and today we're going to be looking at the top 5 most commonly overlooked maintenance items that BMW owners forget to do. Now, I used to previously work as a BMW technician at a few different European shops, and I saw some common things between a lot of cars that people just forget to do. Maintenance things that if you were to service them sooner, they would save you a headache in the future. So here, the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to be wiper blades. Now, this is kind of a boring one to start off with, so I just want to get it out of the way first. Remember to do your wiper blades. A lot of times they'll start folding over like this one is, they get wavy, or they get dirt. Like, check out how much dirt is inside of this wiper blade, and then that will cause scratches on your windshield. So you don't want to scratch up your windshield because that's going to cause visibility issues. Here in the front, my windshield is in good condition on the A39 M5 wagon, but here on my back windshield, you can see that there are scratch marks from this wiper blade going bad and not being replaced. And then next thing you know, this arm is spinning and it's scratching the surface of your windshield because there is no wiper blade on it. So remember to do your wiper blades. What I like to do as well is coat my windshields with a layer of Rain-X or some sort of glass cleaner. Maybe ceramic coat would work well as well, because you don't want the wiper blades to get dirty quicker. So clean your windshield, and that way your wiper blades will last much longer. Now, the next item that I want to talk about are your cabin air filters. On most BMWs, these are located in the engine bay. You should be able to see them. They're near the firewall, but they're very important because they obviously filter the air that goes into your car. Now, one thing to look for when you're buying your cabin air filter is to get one that has a charcoal filter on it. That's usually going to be labeled first thing, and it's going to be integrated into the filter, but that's going to make sure that some of the toxic gases and particulates in the air don't get through the air conditioning system and into your car and blown into your face. So remember to replace these. The one on the E46 that we have was disgusting, and we replaced that first when we got the car here in the garage. The E39 M5 only had one air filter, so we replaced those recently, and it's just something that you can commonly forget. I've also found like animal droppings inside of air boxes or inside these filters. You would be disgusted by some of the stuff that you see, to think that you could get mildew or tree droppings or animal droppings in the cabin filter, because remember, they're located right outside right here, so anything that comes down the windshield is going to get into your air area. That is going to go through your air filter and start clogging it up. So remember to change this filter out often. If you can, maybe once a year, but at a minimum once every 2 years. Now, on to our next item on the list. I'm sure you didn't expect to see these, but it's your oxygen sensors. Now, oxygen sensors can throw a code when they go bad, and that's an easy indicator that you need to replace them. But a lot of times they'll cause other issues, and then you'll be stuck diagnosing something that at the end of the day could be an oxygen sensor. So what happens is over time, these will get fouled out. Just so much fuel and so much heat has been exposed to the sensor that, it'll start reading off. And you'll notice the symptom as probably a loss of power or bad gas mileage. Can cause a lot of weird codes, can cause weird running issues. At the end of the day, these things, they are a sensor. They need to be replaced just like everything else in the motor. And so I would recommend that you change your oxygen sensors out, let's say every 60 to 80,000 miles. That way you know that they're good. For tuned cars, it's a whole different story. For cars that are tuned aggressively, especially forced induction cars like 335s that I used to work on, those have to have the sensors replaced all the time. So expect to replace these a ton if you're going to be running an aggressive map, but otherwise for stock cars, it's still a good idea because, like I said, you could be suffering from bad gas mileage and not even know it. Now, the next thing that I see most commonly neglected is the fluids. Now, of course, everyone's usually good about their oil change. BMW is great at having a service indicator on the dashboard that says that you need an oil change, but on most cars or on some of the cars, that interval can be 12 or 13,000 miles, and that is a big no-no in my book. I think you should be doing oil changes every 6,000 or 7,000 miles for most engines. For some engines, it's even recommended less than that. Or if you're going to be racing the car, that decreases the interval for how often you need to replace the oil. So change your oil out often. It's going to help avoid a lot of the Vanos issues, seal issues, gasket leaks. Think about it. When oil gets used and consumed, it starts to get more viscous and flows more like water and less like a lubricant. So if you don't change your oil and it gets more viscous like water, well then eventually that's easier to escape through the small cracks in your gaskets and stuff like that. So remember to change your oil out often. I think that is an obvious one. Now, your brake fluid. I have found so many cars with neglected brake fluid because you just don't think about it. Sure, you'll get a brake pad sensor light that comes on and it'll tell you to replace the brake pads, and some of the newer cars have service intervals for the brake fluid, and that's great, but a lot of people skip it or they ignore that service interval, and I think that it's very underrated to do. Now on the E46 again, that was neglected, that brake fluid was brown. It looked more like wine than anything. And it also was causing some brake issues. So we had to replace the master cylinder in that car because there was so much gunk inside the master cylinder that had lined it. It just wasn't working properly anymore. I also see a lot of ABS failures on BMWs, and I think I see a correlation between cars that have bad brake fluid and cars that have failed ABS units. That's just something in my experience, so I'd recommend that you change your brake fluid often if you can. So once every year, once every 2 years, really depends on how often you're driving. If you're boiling over the brakes at the track a lot, you're probably gonna have to replace this more often. And the last fluid that we have here is power steering fluid. Again, you see a lot of pumps failing, you see a lot of leaks coming out of the power steering rack or some of the hoses, and that's because this fluid gets more viscous, just like all these things over time. So I recommend doing a power steering flush. It's a little difficult to do. There's no easy way to do it, or clean way, I should say. But if you can replace the power steering fluid, it's gonna save you a lot of long-term issues, and it's gonna help keep your steering fresh and smooth. Now, the last thing on our list here, and thanks for watching all the way through, guys, is gonna be the fuel system service. And I'm talking about the fuel filter. A lot of times people forget to do this, but if you've ever replaced a fuel pump in your car before, you've probably seen the gross gunk and the sediment that lines the bottom. And that's just because it gets into the fuel, gets into the fuel tank at the gas station, goes through the pump, goes through your car. But what your fuel filter is doing is filtering out all that stuff. The problem is when this starts getting clogged up, it starts going through the fuel filter and ends up in your injectors. Then when your injectors have sediment in them, then the injectors don't open all the way and the pulse isn't right and the fuel delivery isn't right. And then you start getting running problems. So you really want to take care of your fuel filters often. So keep the problem at bay. And if you can, it's good to check your fuel pump as well as your fuel tank to make sure that there's no big sediment. If you can clean it on an empty tank, that'd be a good option too. But here what I have is some Seafoam. Now Seafoam is one of my favorite products to use on old cars because, like I said, these injectors tend to get clogged up and never cleaned. Imagine going on a car that has 125,000 miles and the injectors were never cleaned. So what I'm going to be doing on our E39 M5 in a future video is I'm going to be replacing the fuel filter, but before I do that, I'm going to run some Seafoam through the motor, and that is going to clean the injectors out, clean the system, and then we're going to replace the fuel filter with a fresh one, and we should be all good to go. Oh, and one last thing about fuel. If you drive a BMW, then you probably need to put 93 octane in. Now, I'm not kidding you, and this isn't a joke, but I've had plenty of people tell me that they put 87 or 89 octane in because, hey, it's cheaper and my car runs the same. Don't do that, folks. You're playing a risky game there. All right, so that's gonna conclude our video for today. I hope that you enjoyed watching. If I missed any maintenance items that you think should be added to this list that people commonly forget to do on their BMWs, let us know down in the comments below. Go ahead and drop a like on the video before you leave because it's free for you, but it really helps the channel and it helps support what we do here at the Bimmer Barn. Subscribe if you wanna see more BMW content like this, and I hope everyone has a great day. See ya.